Your Excellency, dear guests, colleagues, students, academic community, it's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to His Excellency Dominic Francois Joseph Momberti and give a brief introduction to his lecture. Dominic Francois Joseph Momberti was born in 1952, 7th of March, and he's a current Secretary for Relations with States in the Roman Curia for the Holy See. He was born in Marrakesh, Morocco, and on September 1981 was appointed parish priest for Ajaccio in France. And he was appointed titular Archbishop of Sagona on May 18th, 2002 by Pope John Paul II, and Secretary for Relations with States by Pope Benedict XVI on 15th of September 2006. And this office is generally seen as a foreign minister of the Holy See. His title of the lecture is The Presence of the Holy See in the International Community. So, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
First of all, I wish to thank the rector and the academic authorities for their kind welcome in this university. And I extend to all of you a very warm greetings, and also I extend to you the cordial greetings and blessings of Pope Benedict II. As you know, the Holy Father has spent a long part of his life as a university professor, and he considers that period as a very fruitful one. And he also likes very much to foster and wishes to foster the links between the church and university, between religion and science, which is a very important topic of today. It is with pleasure that I have accepted the invitation to share with you some reflections about the presence of the Holy See in the international community. I will speak about the relations that the Pope himself and his collaborators, his offices in Rome, which assist him in his task of pastor of the Universal Church, and in relations with states, concluding with a brief reference to the relations between the Holy See and Estonia. First of all, a preliminary question, I would say. The reason behind the relations of the Holy See with the international community. Why does the Holy See, the Church, the Catholic Church, establish relations with the international community? Why it must establish relations with this community? According to the teaching of the Church, Christ wished that his church be a visible community in the world. Christians are at the same time members of the church and citizens of their respective nations. And so, church and state cannot ignore each other or, worse, oppose each other. For there is, at this regard, a famous passage of the document of the Council Vatican II, Gaudium et Spes, on the Church in the modern world, which recalls this principle. The Church and the political community in their own fields are autonomous and independent from each other, yet both, under different titles, are devoted to the personal and social vocation of the same persons. The more that both foster sounder cooperation between themselves with due consideration for the circumstances of time and place, the more effective will their service be exercised for the good of all. There is another aspect which must be kept in mind in order to understand why it is necessary that the Church have relations with states. The Church enters into a relationship with all nations in which its members live in order to ensure that their religious freedom be kept, safeguarded, and offer its own specific contribution for the common good of all the nation. And in this respect, in the Catholic point of view, it is not just the Church living and operating within that specific country which enters into a relation with the state. As by its particular structure, in which the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, it is himself and his collaborators which enters in relations with a particular state or with other states, not as an external authority, but as an internal authority of the Church. And so it is entitled to represent the Church in that country with its needs, its right, and its interest. There is also another important aspect under this regard, which is that the Holy See establishes and enters in relations with states not merely as a community of believers, but as a true subject of international law, as states and international organizations. This prerogative of the Holy See, which is based on the historic situation and tradition that is recognized fully by the international community, finds expression in particular in the accreditations of diplomatic representatives and the conclusion of agreements with states. This is, of course, an added value for the Catholic Church in a given country, because in particular, when there is an agreement, this agreement is not only an eternal document, but it becomes an international document, convention between the state and the Holy See for the benefit of the local church. It is therefore because the Church is a visible reality present in practically all nations of the world that the Holy See, the Pope and the organisms of the Roman Curia enter into a relationship with the international community and first of all with states and also with international organizations. Now, the different modes in which the Holy See relates with the international community. First of all, the personal activity of the Supreme Pontiff, of the Pope. The first agent of the Holy See's international activity is the Holy Father himself, who embodies this relationship in a number of ways. First of all, by his almost daily meetings with bishops and pastors of local church who come regularly to Rome. The audiences granted to the papal representative, the nuncio, who are his ambassador all over the world, and also to political authorities who come at the Vatican. For instance, recently, in the occasion of the G8 summit, President Obama, but also the Prime Minister of Japan, the Prime Minister of Canada, of Australia, and so on. These are opportunities for the Pope not only to be updated about the reality, the problems, the challenges faced by nations and local churches, but it is really an opportunity to know directly the personalities and the pastors of the world. There are also the apostolic visits which the Pope makes to various countries in so many parts of the world, and Pope John Paul II visited almost all countries, and in particular came also here in Estonia in 1993. This is also very useful to establish direct contact with local churches and civil authorities of these countries. For instance, for Pope Benedict XVI, a very important occasion was his trip to the United Nations last year in April 2008, and where he delivered an important speech, as had done before him Pope Paul VI and Pope John Paul II. And I will mention after that also the trips that the Holy Father has made this year in Africa and in Jordan and Holy Land. There are also other ways in which the Pope intervenes, in particular his speeches and documents. For instance, at the end of the Sunday prayers, often the Pope makes a reference to some international situation of concern, and this almost every week. This offers the Pope to give his teaching and a reflection about global and particular issues which are at the heart of the relationship between the Holy See and the international community. But of course, the Pope can't do by himself alone all the diplomatic and international work, and is helped in this by collaborators and offices. which are called now and are being known for centuries are the Roman Curia. That means the offices which help the Pope in his task of Supreme Pontiff of the Catholic Church. Among these offices, which are called dicasteries, the main one for the international activity of the Church is the Secretariat of State. This office assists closely the Roman Pontiff in the exercise of his supreme mission, as states the Constitution about the Roman Curia, Pastor Bonus. It is presided over by the Cardinal Secretary of State, currently Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, and which is assisted by the substitute of the Secretary of State, which is in charge of general affairs, and the Secretary for Relations with States, which deals directly with diplomatic and international affairs. So there are two sections in the Secretariat of State, one for general affairs and the other for relations with states. I have the honor to be primarily responsible for this section for relations with states, and so for the handling of all matters related to the Holy See's dealings with government, diplomatic relations, stipulation of concordates and similar agreements, and also, which is most important in our activity, our presence in international fora, international organizations and conferences. As in any similar institution, our work consists mainly of meetings and study of dossiers and documents. On a daily basis, our office receives informations and queries from the papal representatives in so many countries and maintains contacts with the embassies of those countries that have diplomatic relations with the Holy See, apart, of course, from other entities and individuals. Among those who visit my office are civil authorities, but also bishops, individually and in group. There are so many also visits that we do and perform outside. For instance, Cardinal Bertone, the Secretary of State, is normally going with the Holy Father in his trip outside. And myself also, I have quite a tight agenda of visit. This month I am here, and in 2 weeks I will be, for instance, in New York for the UN General Assembly, and later on for other international meetings. As you may appreciate, these visits are valuable opportunities for intense contacts and exchanges, not only with the local community, but also with the civil authorities. Another important instrument, and very important basic instrument of the Holy See's activity in relations with states, are the papal representatives present in those countries which with the Holy See has diplomatic relations. And even in other cases, there are also in which there are not diplomatic relations, there are also the possibilities of papal representatives, which are called apostolic delegates, while when there are full diplomatic relations, the papal representative, so the ambassador, is called the nuncio. And we have here, for instance, His Excellency Archbishop Bonazzi, who is the nuncio for Estonia, resident in Lithuania and competent also for Latvia. This task of the papal representative is very similar to the one on one hand to the task and duties of an ambassador, but it has first of all an ecclesiastical reason to be, and it is first of all an ecclesiastical mission, and that means to represent the Pope to the local church and to make the Pope present in the local church. So he is not a foreigner, in particular for the church to which he represents the Holy Father. He is the expression of the communion of the Pope with the bishops and of the bishops and the local churches with the Pope in Rome. Of course, besides this, he is also a truly diplomatic agent, an ambassador, and he has the same activities like his colleagues of the diplomatic corps. The diplomatic service of the Holy See is one of the oldest in history, and it is regulated by the norms of international and diplomatic law as codified in particular by the Vienna Conventions. If we consider the period between the end of the Second World War and the present time, we can really realize how far-reaching the network of papal representation is. In 1945, there were merely 30 nunciators, embassies, 10 in Europe, 19 in America, 1 in Africa, and 22 apostolic delegations. That means representations not with countries without full diplomatic relations. Nowadays, instead, the apostolic nunciators are 115, which are actually much more, in fact, because in many cases, the nuncio are accredited not only to one country, but to 2 or more, like Archbishop Bonazzi. Actually, the countries with which the Holy See has full diplomatic relations, as I will mention after, is almost 180 countries. Our diplomatic personnel, composed of papal representatives, most of them are archbishops, and of their collaborators, who are priests, hails from about 50 different countries. This cosmopolitan face of the diplomatic corps of the Holy See is a reply to the hope expressed by the Second Vatican Council regarding the need to internationalize the composition of the central organs of the Church. I shall conclude this note about the nunciators, recalling the task which the Code of Canon Law attributes to the legates of the Roman Pontiff in their dealings with states and their respective authority. The Canon 365 reads, "It is also the special function of a pontifical legate who at the same time acts as a legate to states, to promote and foster relations between the Apostolic See and the authorities of the state, to deal with questions which pertain to relations between church and state, and in a special way to deal with the drafting and implementation of concordates and other agreements of this type." And this preparing and implementing agreements is and has been in history and is currently also a very important duty of the nuncio, on which I will say some words afterwards. But beside the presence of the Holy See in the singular states with its nuncios, ambassadors and embassies, there is also a presence in international organizations which has been developing very much in the last 20, 30 years. The Holy See is fully involved in multilateral diplomacy. At the moment, there are 15 missions of this kind. The first step was set up in 1949 when Pope Pius XII accredited a permanent observer to the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, in Rome. 3 years later, the Pope accredited a representative of the Holy See to UNESCO in Paris. In 1964, Paul VI established a permanent observer mission to the United Nations in New York. Some of these organisms are of a regional nature. For instance, we have the nuncio to the European Union in Brussels, a special envoy to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. We are members of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, with our mission in Vienna. And also we maintain relations with the organizations of American states in Washington, the organization of the Arab League in Cairo, and with the African Union in Addis Ababa through our permanent representatives. This, as I mentioned, have been a very important development in the activity of the Holy See in the last decades. The Holy See has been convinced of the importance of multilateral activity and recognizes very clearly the importance of these organisms, in particular to foster development, human rights, and now, for instance, to defend the environment. Anyway, it is a critical presence, and often you can read in the press declarations of the Holy Father, of representatives, about the need for these organizations to really base their activity on the dignity of all persons, in particular, the sanctity of life and the real needs of the population, to foster what is really the common good of humanity. And it is within this framework that the delicate action of the Holy See is to be understood, to always remember these principles who are basic for the conviviality of all nations. I have mentioned our representative to the international community, in particular our ambassador, the nuncio, but the activity of the diplomatic of the activity of the Holy See is also exercised through the diplomatic corps accredited to the Holy See. That means the embassies which are in Rome or not in Rome and maintain contacts with the Secretariat of State in the Vatican, like the ambassadors in the capital, maintain and foster contact with the Ministry of External Affairs. They are one of the main activity in this regard is the speech that the Holy Father delivers to the diplomatic corps accredited at the beginning of a new year. It's an occasion to exchange wishes for the new year, and it is also an occasion for the Pope to make a global view, to have a speech with a global view of the international situation. In the occasion of the last speech on the 7th of January, there was a press release that we gave to our press office, which remembers that there are at present 177 states that have established full diplomatic relations with the Holy See. The last one to have done so is Botswana. To these countries, we should add the Russian Federation and the Palestinian Authority, which is represented by special representatives, and we can add also European Union, which has an ambassador, and the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. At this point, as this number is so high, we can ask which states have not yet established the diplomatic relations with the Holy See. Well, there are 16, most of them in Asia and some in Africa and Oceania. In 9 of these countries, there is no Vatican envoy present, even though there are occasional informal contacts. For instance, we have no diplomatic relations with Vietnam, but each year we have an official delegations which go to Vietnam to have contact with the government authorities, and to visit the local church. In some other countries, we have, as I mentioned before, an apostolic delegate. That means a papal representative, normally not resident in that country, but who goes from time to visit the local church and also to have informal contact with authorities. Some of these countries which have not yet diplomatic relations were anyway represented, for instance, at the funeral of Pope John Paul II, at the inauguration of the pontificate of Pope Benedict XVI. In this occasion, Pope Benedict said, "I am also thinking of the nations with which the Holy See does not have yet diplomatic relations. Some of them took part in the celebration of the funeral of my predecessor and for my election to the chair of Peter. Having appreciated these gestures, I would like to thank them and to address a respectful greeting to the civil authorities of those countries. Moreover, I express the hope that sooner or later I will see them represented at the Holy See." And this is, of course, not a wish moved by a desire for greater power and prestige, but a sincere willingness to dialogue with all the members of the human family. At the end, I will dedicate some words to another important means for the Holy See to deal with relations with states, to deal with states. And it is, as I mentioned before, concordates and other agreements. These are described in the Code of Canon Law as agreements entered into by the Apostolic See with nations or other political societies. Among the various types of agreements, concordates, properly so-called, are those which regulate all questions of common interest between the two parties, the Holy See and the state, including matters like schools and marriage. Besides these comprehensive agreements, which are called concordate, we have other forms of agreements and also different terminology and provisions. They can have elements which deal with some topics. They can also be for a certain duration, and so on. There is a lot of flexibility. Until up the 20th century, we usually find agreements concluded between the Pope and the sovereign, the reigning sovereign of a country. Now there are often some other types of agreement. During the pontificate of John Paul II, we can find 2 concordates, 7 conventions, more than 60 agreements, 30 exchanges of notes, 5 protocols, 3 exchanges of letters, a temporary agreement, and 2 avenants, which are protocol practically. That means that there is a lot, as I said, of flexibility in these agreements, and this is also the form in vigor in the international community. It is nothing special. It is according to the forms that the international community have established, in particular by the Convention of the Law of Treaties, which was codified in the 1969 Vienna Convention. And in that convention, like as in previous convention, for instance in Vienna also, the Convention on relations, or diplomatic relations, the Holy See have actively participated in. and in the preparation of the document, and is part of that document. And these activities in international codification and convention is still very active. For instance, like last December, I personally signed and ratified the convention and delivered the instrument of ratification signed by the Pope about the Convention on Cluster Munitions, which is an important instrument which aims at strengthening international humanitarian law. And all these instruments the Holy See participates in are binding and are regulated by international law, and the Holy See respects this fully. Actually, there is also in the Code of Canon Law an article which says that international agreements reached by the Apostolic See, even if they are contrary to the Code, continue to apply. And we can remark that these concordates and agreements are stipulated with very different countries and kind of government. It must be remembered that agreements are stipulated by states and not by a government at a particular moment. And it is the same state that is committed to respecting it, even though the government changes. And the main desire of the Holy See when she concludes and these kinds of agreements is, first of all, to safeguard the freedom of the Church and the religious freedom of the citizens. This, I say, to answer to some critics that says from time to time that concordates are an instrument which has been used to enter in relation and to have links with authoritarian or dictatorial regimes. But these stipulations are, as I said, first not with a regime but a state, and that for the benefits first of Catholics, of course, of the Catholic Church, but also for all citizens. And often I remember that the agreements are not a situation of, because we seek a situation of privilege. We seek religious freedom for us, but also for all the citizens, and we wish that all citizens, as the Catholic Church, can organize according to international standards their own life. First of all, before these agreements were generally between the Holy See and European or Latin American states. But now we have development also in other continents, like Africa and Asia. We have agreements with Tunisia, Morocco, Gabon, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Kazakhstan, Philippines, and other countries. And not necessarily they are Catholic, as I have mentioned some of them, Morocco, Tunisia, Kazakhstan, the state of Israel also has a fundamental agreement with the Catholic Church, with the Holy See, and we are discussing still now an economic agreement. What are the contents of such agreements? Generally, we can see, especially in today's agreement, that the conventions between the Holy See and the states regulate the following matters: diplomatic relations, the status and freedom of the Church, which is very important, the freedom to appoint a bishop and to communicate with Rome, the situation and of the assistance to military personnel through military ordinariates, the legal condition of the Church and of the clergy, and of the congregations and religious order, religious formations in schools, protection of artistic and cultural patrimony, and so on. These are matters which concern the life and mission of the Church, but also most of them are directly connected with the good of the human person in general. And as I have said already, it is for the benefit and of all the population. It is to allow the Catholic Church and the Catholic institutions to serve all the people of a country. At the end, so some words about the bilateral relations between the Holy See and Estonia. They are currently regulated by an agreement which came into force with an exchange of notes 10 years ago in March 1999, and which deals with various aspects of the legal status and activity of the Catholic Church in this country. It guarantees the legal recognition of the Catholic Church and of its institutions, the freedom of the Holy See in the appointment of the bishop or apostolic administrator, who is here with us, Bishop Philippe Jourdan, and regulates the pastoral work of foreign priests in Estonia, giving them the possibility to get a visa, the teaching of Catholic religion in schools, and the civil recognition of canonical marriages. The aim of the agreement is to foster a better understanding between the authorities of the states and the pastors of the Church to the benefit of the common good of the whole nation. Again, I thank you for your welcome and for your patience in this lecture, and I will finish quoting the words of your beautiful national anthem, making my own your prayer for the well-being of your country. May God in heaven thee defend, may be guard, may be shield, forever may bless and wield all deeds of thine. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for a very interesting overview, not only your activities, but also the activities, priorities, and values you stand for of the Holy See. It's also worth mentioning probably that the Holy See is also a member of the European University Association. That means one of the priorities is also university education. I guess we do have an opportunity to ask a couple of questions. So please take the advantage of, I would say, the unique opportunity to do so.
Yes, as you mentioned, Mr. Rector, we are member of the process of Bologna, and we follow very carefully all these questions, and we adapt our system to the European system of higher education.
First of all, thanks for visiting Tartu, and I have such a question that relations between Catholic Church and Russian Church are somewhat cold, and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko had an unofficial visit to Vatican this year, and as funny as it might seem, he suggested to hold a meeting between the Pope and the Russian Orthodox Patriarch in Belarus. And my question is Pope going to visit Belarus with that purpose? And the second question is, really Catholic Church ready to face such challenges as secularization of modern communities? Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, for your first question, Belarus is one of the countries with which the Holy See maintains full diplomatic relations. We have a nuncio resident, and we have regular contact with the authorities. And this year, actually, the President Lukashenko visited Pope Benedict II and offered this possibility of a meeting. But you know, first of all, we deal with the Orthodox Church through our own institution, which is first of all the Pontifical Council for Christian Unity. And it has been a topic very much discussed in the last years, and certainly one element to take in consideration is that Pope Benedict II and the current Patriarch, His Holiness Kirill, have met already, not while Patriarch Kirill as Patriarch, but while he was the head of the external relations of the Patriarchate. And so certainly we can say that there are personal relations already between the Pope and the Patriarch. The question of meeting is still open for the date, for the place. So I really can't tell you anything more. I think that there is a desire from both parts to have these steps, and it is not mainly a diplomatic question, but a religious questions, and we do pray that this happen, and that will be a sign of Christian unity, of Christian love between the two confessions. but again, it's an open question. For the second question, I do hope that the Catholic Church and the other Christian denominations are ready to respond to the challenges of secularizations, especially in Europe. Be sure that we are, and first of all, the Pope is very much aware of the situation and his insistence, but this was also an important part of the teaching of Pope John Paul II. It is the insistence of the two late popes on the Christian roots of Europe is part of this concern that in particular I would say for Eastern Europe because people have fight for the faith in so many Eastern Europe countries, and even though now they are in paradise, they deserve that their sons, grandsons be aware that spiritual that religion was an important part of their life and an important part also of their fight for freedom.
No more questions. Once again, to Your Excellency, thank you very much for coming to our university, to our city, and we really hope that you enjoy the rest of your stay here in Tartu and in Estonia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.